Brief history of the Canberra Raiders. They were formed in '82 as part of the New South Wales Rugby League Expansion outside Sydney. Alongside the Illawarra Steelers, they were admitted to the league in 1982. They played at the originally played at the Seaford Oval in Kewenbean, New South Wales, before actually moving to the Australian Capital Territory in 1990. So they're playing outside of where they're from So they moved to Canberra in 1990. Ironically, they got a lot of their success in this period. Very successful team in the late 80s, early 90s. Now, they stayed in the New South Wales Rugby League structure until 1996, until the Super League War. They literally stayed in the Rugby League structures that were already in place till the Super League War. Now, the Super League War itself is a very complicated period, and this is the end of Canberra being a good side for a while. Yeah, the Super League War actually caused Canberra's downfall for the next decade or so, until recently under Ricky Stewart they've become a more competitive team, and they've unearthed some star players, and his coaching style has really helped the team grow. I know they've got a good squad again, but for a long time, about 10 years or so, they only had 1.4 rep players in the Canberra squad in the late 2000s. It got that bad. Yes, it did get that bad, and that was partly to do with this Super League War. And it's a battle between Murdoch and the Australian Rugby League. It also had consequences over here in the UK. We adopted the Super League format in 1995, and we converted the original Rugby League structures from a winter sport to a summer sport to mean it would parallel with the Southern Hemisphere, which is obviously their winter, our summer. So now we play in our summer here in the Northern Hemisphere. Mad that. Oh no, let's play a really physical contact sport in the heat of summer. Yeah, I'm surprised we don't have more injuries in the Super League and health issues with players. I really do. So the Super League War affects rugby league around the world. It also affects Canberra because they decide to play in the new breakaway Australian Super League alongside Cronulla, another team that had a really difficult last 20 years. Cronulla, yeah. They decide to go into the Australian Super League. And when you have two parallel leagues, the Australian Rugby League and the Australian Super League playing against each other, you're dividing resources and playing resources and fans, and there were sometimes two teams in a city. It was mad, and Sydney was a mess. And it basically came to an impasse where the NRL, which was basically the leftovers of the New South Wales Rugby League, was set up. And Murdoch had some say in the NRL as well for the early days. It also led to the formation of the Melbourne Storm, which I've done a video on. So the NRL was set up, and Canberra are going, we're very sorry for going to this naughty Super League, we'll come back, please. And Cronulla are also, yeah, we're very sorry as well, we'll come back, please. And they're readmitted in 1998. After 98, the next decade and a half is not great for Canberra. As time goes on, the great team they had from the late 80s, early 90s starts whittling away. They're losing players to the UK and other teams in Australia. Players are retiring as well. The salary cap is now a thing. This is where the salary cap is introduced, and Canberra struggle with that. And by the late 2000s, they've only got 4 players that have played rep football, as I said. The squad by the late 2000s was appalling. Yet they never got the wooden spoon off, apart from their inaugural season. Yeah. They were bad. They weren't the worst team in Australia. Ricky Stewart is now the coach, and he's really turned the team around in the last 4 years. They are a solid outfit now. They've got some great players. They've attracted some of the best players from the UK. They've attracted some of the best players in Australia, and they are competitive. While they haven't won any silverware since before the Super League Wars, I will say this: they are a decent side, and I like watching them play. The style they play, it's a bit on the edge of your seat. And Jared Croker as captain, how he hasn't played for the New South Wales Blues and how he hasn't played for Australia is beyond me. Jared Croker is a goal-kicking machine, let alone a good leader. And Ricky Stewart, a former player of this team, alongside Mal Meninga and Laurie Daly, who both coached in State of Origin and played in State of Origin. I think he's a future State of Origin coach and possibly a future national coach. I honestly believe that. I honestly believe Ricky Stewart is destined for slightly bigger and better things. But let's have a look at their honours. They've only got the wooden spoon once, which was in their inaugural season in 1982, which happens with expansion teams in many sports. You generally suck early on. But they've won the Premiership in 89, 1990, and the first one I remember, obviously the last one, is 94. They were runners-up in 87 and 91, and they got the minor Premiership in 1990. So all their success happened before the Australian Super League Wars. Post the Australian Super League War in 1997, their success has been muted. They've got to some finals 30 a few times, they've got to the post-season, but for the most part they're an average side, and they were rebuilding for a lot of the time post the Super League War. But their success in the late 80s, early 90s made this team one of the best teams you'll ever see on paper. When you've got players like Mal Meninga and Laurie Daly, Ricky Stewart, a whole host of others, yeah, they're going to be difficult to stop. Very similar in their success if you compare another sport to like the Edmonton Oilers. Very successful in the 80s and the 90s, and then they stopped being successful for a long time and are very slowly getting their way back to the top. Very, very similar story. Hopefully, one day we can see another minor premiership or a premiership there or a runners-up thing there and a bit more success return to Canberra. Their history is rich and interesting, but the Super League War, I think, is what has undone a lot of sides in Australian Rugby League and has really changed the style, because when they rejoined the NRL, there was a little thing which they didn't use very effectively, and that was the salary cap. Canberra didn't work around the salary cap very effectively. So post 1998, the team started declining, and in the next decade or so, they got really bad. Like, if Brett Frinch comes in to replace Ricky Stewart and then leaves to play underneath Ricky Stewart at another club, that says something's wrong. But the salary cap has affected Canberra in the early days, and it took a long time after losing all these star players and having no quality in the side to get good again. So the salary cap is something going forward that the NRL needs to look at to make sure it's effective for all sides, and all sides can compete with it. But looking at their history, I think they are due at some point to get some more success. Absolutely. I remember the '94 grand final because this was when the Super League Wars were about to start, and I remember that grand final. But this period, 1995 to 97, I think is possibly the most damaging and period of professional sport has ever seen, because it just didn't affect the Australian Rugby League, it affected the British and New Zealand Rugby Leagues as well. And the effects are still being felt today. And now the NRL, which was the successor league to all this mess that was the Super League War, is superior to the British Super League that came out the Super League War on top. The roles have been massively reversed, and the NRL is far ahead now. And now Canberra is starting to nick. Bateman, for example, English second row centre, has just joined Canberra. There's already several English players at Canberra who are too good for the Super League. Hodgson, Whitehead, Elliot Whitehead, and Josh Hodgson are hardcore members, key members of this side now. Luke Bateman's joined them. So there's a fair few English players playing for Canberra. There's a fair few English players playing in the NRL right now. You could probably field an entire team, a starting lineup at least, of English players or English registered players that play in the NRL. So the NRL, I think, is definitely winning the battle between Super League. And I would say Canberra are part of this battle because they did try the Super League and they realised it was a mistake. And because of that mistake, this thing called a salary cap was brought in, and they struggled to adapt to that for the best part of 20 years. But there we go, that's a brief history of the Canberra Raiders. They were one of the rebel clubs that joined the Super League alongside Cronulla. And we can look at Cronulla and how it took them the best part of 20 years to win, after the Super League Wars, to win their grand final. And yeah, it's an interesting look at the history of rugby league in Australia. Canberra is important because they're an expansion team outside of Sydney. They become very successful, and then this moment happens. And we will keep harking back to the Australian Super League Wars, I think, in a lot of video histories of clubs. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Place your comments below, and I'll have some more videos for you soon.